Man, am I so happy to be putting a tutorial together for this course. Wildwoods is one of my favorite tracks. Nah, I'm not going to beat around the bush here. Wildwoods is definitely my favorite track in the entire game. If you thought my gushing over Cloudtop Cruise was obnoxious, I could put together a whole video singing my praises for just this one course, but I'll spare you that nonsense. For now, at least. What I will say about why I love Wildwoods that's actually relevant to this video is that it's one of the few courses on 200cc that's constantly keeping your hands busy without ever making you even need to think about brake drifting, which just makes it feel really satisfying to play. But before I go any further, I'm going to just stop here and say welcome to part 91 of Basic Training, where we're going to cover everything you need to know about Wildwoods on 200cc. As always, we're going to cover the recommended builds, mushroom strats, coin lines, and other advanced tips and tricks to help you start mastering the course. This tutorial is going to be broken down into two parts. In part 1, the goal is to help you conquer the staff ghost, and I'm going to help you do that with a version of the run that uses no advanced strategies whatsoever. We're going to kick it up a notch in part 2 with strategies that I use in my current personal best. We won't be covering the world record strategies specifically in this video since they're basically just cleaner versions of what I do in my PB. If you're finding these tutorials useful, please don't forget to drop a like and a comment, since this not only lets me know that you're enjoying my videos, but perhaps more importantly, it lets YouTube know to recommend these videos to other racers who are also trying to improve at the game. Also, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell so that you can stay up to date with my latest content, since I release a new time trial or deep dive video every week. Now let's get wild and check out Wildwoods. As per the usual, I'm going to recommend Yoshi, Leaf Tires, Bitty Buggy, and Paper Glider if you're just starting out learning 200cc. This is a build that's got a good amount of mini turbo without sacrificing too much speed, but perhaps more importantly, it's got really good handling, and so it's going to be a lot safer than our usual try-hard build that swaps out Yoshi for Waluigi. This is also the build that the world record uses, and really everything I'm about to go over isn't super hard to learn with Waluigi, so that's going to be the build that I use throughout this tutorial. One last thing to mention about this build is the use of leaf tires instead of rollers. The reason for this choice is that leaf tires have slightly higher speed and get an additional boost to anti-grav speed, which pretty much makes up the entirety of this course. But that's enough of that, let's check out the track. So before the run starts, you want to start holding right so that you can make your way over to the right hand side of the track. Then start a right drift and start holding left to widen your drift angle. Starting a drift this early is going to allow us to grab the first 3 coins while building up a super mini turbo. After releasing the Super Mini Turbo, we want to go to the left-hand side of the track, since it will net us an extra 3 coins, and frankly, coins are somewhat hard to come by on this track. To grab all 3 coins, we're going to want to be pointing our cart towards the middle coin right in front of the ramp. You then want to trick off the ramp as early as possible, because this will help you get less height on your trick. If you trick too late, you're going to get too much height and miss the coin like I do here. Now, while we're in midair, we want to be holding down the drift button and right on the joystick so that when we land, we'll immediately start a right drift. This technique is called a slip drift, and it's going to come up a few more times throughout this video, especially in the level 2 version of the run. You have a little bit of freedom to choose which coin you want to grab here, and it kind of depends on the angle that you've got when going into this drift. As long as you're grabbing the middle or the right coin, you're in pretty good shape though. After building up a mini turbo, release and left hop for alignment, and then just drive straight up the track to grab the leftmost coin on the ramp. Then trick off the ramp, do a right slip drift, and build up a super mini turbo before the glider. You see this barrel here? We're going to go around the outside of it for now, but when we get to level 2, we're actually going to be drifting around the inside part of this turn to cut the barrel, so look forward to that. Now after building up the super mini turbo, we want to release as soon as possible and then trick off the glider ramp. You want to try and land a little bit further to the left of the platform than I do here, because we're going to do yet another slip drift to the left and hug the wall as tightly as we can. This next section is a little weird, so we're going to spend some time to describe in detail what's going on here. There are 2 ramps in this little waterfall section of the track, and you might be tempted to trick off them to get the trick boosts. The problem is that the turns immediately after each of these ramps are both pretty tight, and if you trick off the ramps, it'll force you to take a really bad line around those turns. So what do we do instead? Well, after building up the first super mini turbo in this section, we're going to release it and immediately start a right drift. And then instead of tricking off the ramp, we're going to just drift off of it instead. This will allow you to build up another super mini turbo before the second ramp, but you don't want to release it right away. Instead, what you want to do is just drift off the second ramp and release the super mini turbo as soon as you get in midair. Then you want to do one more slip drift to the right and finish up the section by building up a mini turbo and tricking off of the ramp. One thing to point out is that you may have noticed that I spent a lot of time in the water as opposed to hugging the inside of the turn as tightly as possible. That's because the water is flowing downward, and this actually gives you a little bit of a boost to your speed. It turns out that the optimal way to take this turn is actually a combination of hanging out in the water and hugging the turn as tightly as possible, but we'll cover that in level 2. So, to recap, land in a left slip drift after the glider, then build up a super mini turbo, release and immediately start a right drift off the first ramp. Build up another super mini turbo and release it just after going off the second ramp, slip drift right, build up a mini turbo and trick off the third ramp to finish up this section. In this section, the lily pad boost ramps actually move around from left to right, and they might be in a different position depending on how long it takes you to get here. But for now, the general idea is to hit as many of the boost pads as you can while staying as close to the center of the track as possible. If you've got to go slightly to the right to hit a ramp, then you definitely want to try and do so, with one major caveat. Notice the path here. The brown track divider here is actually a solid wall, so you don't want to go so far to the right that you risk running into it. Now to finish up the lap, we're just going to trick off the ramp and angle yourself slightly to the left. As soon as you land, use your mushroom and trick off the shortcut ramp and we are done. Lap 2 plays pretty similarly to lap 1, with one major difference being at the start of the lap. Rather than go to the left side of the fork like before, we're going to want to take the right-hand path. Trick off the ramp and then do another slip drift, but rather than try and build up a mini turbo, release the drift immediately. This will help you keep a really nice line around the turn. That's really the only difference between laps 1 and 2 for the level 1 version of the run, but before checking out a full run, let's recap the coin lines. Your first 3 coins will come at the very start of the lap. Your next 3 coins are going to come from the left-hand part of the split path section. The 7th coin is going to come from the ramp at the end of the split path section. You're pretty much guaranteed to get at least one more coin from the lily pad boost ramp section if you still need it, but you should be able to snag some extra coins from the waterfall section as well to finish lap 1 with 10 coins. Alright, now let's take a look at how all these strats are put together in a full run. Alright, now let's talk about my current personal best, because it's actually pretty different from the level 1 version of the run. We're actually going to use a mushroom at the very start of the run to get up to top speed as early as possible. And then when grabbing our second set of 3 coins, after building up the first mini turbo, we actually want to soft drift left to build up a second mini turbo. It's also important to note that you should be trying to release your mini turbos as soon as possible. Next up is the barrel cut. It's actually not that difficult to learn. Basically, after the ramp going into the bridge section, we want to slip drift just like before. Looking at the turn, you'll see that there's a little corner here, followed by a rounded section, followed by another corner at the barrel. You want to hug the first corner as tightly as possible, but then neutral drift around the curve. This is going to cause you to take a slightly wider line around the curve, but there's a reason for that. You might notice that the right-hand side of the bridge has yellow paint on it. To take this cut without clipping the barrel or falling off the right-hand side of the track, we want our cart to basically be right on top of the yellow paint when hitting the second corner portion of the track. The nice thing is that this cut works almost exactly the same on 150cc, So if you're having trouble figuring this out, I actually suggest hopping into 150cc and grinding this out for a bit. And then once you're comfortable hitting the barrel cut on 150cc, then just do the same thing but on 200. It's honestly a lot easier than it looks. Now once we've done the barrel cut, we're going to build up a super mini turbo and trick off the glider just like before. The waterfall section plays out similarly to the level 1 version of the run, except that when going off the second ramp, we want to hug the right hand wall of the track as tightly as possible instead of hanging out in the water. Now here comes another one of my favorite shortcuts in the entire game. Again, depending on your pace, things may be set up slightly differently when you come to the lily pad boost ramp portion of the track, but it plays out exactly the same as before. The difference is that if you'll recall, we used a mushroom at the start of the lap, and so we're actually down a mushroom by the time we get to this section. So what do? Well, first things first, get to the right hand side of the track as quickly as possible. Then just before you get to the ramp, do a left hop and then trick off the ramp. As soon as you land, do a right hop, and this should allow you to jump clean over the grass and land on top of the ramp, allowing you to trick off of it to finish the lap. There are a couple things to point out about this shortcut. First off, the left hop after coming out of the lily pad boost ramp section. The reason for the left hop is for alignment purposes. Doing this hop ensures that you're facing the grass after you do the trick. The next thing to point out is why we want to get as close to the right hand side of the track as possible. The reason that we want to make our way over to the right hand side here is that it'll put us closer to the right hand side of the grass cut. And this is important because if you'll notice, the grass portion on the right hand side is way shorter than the grass portion on the left hand side. So if you're too far to the left before tricking off the first ramp, you won't be able to clear all the grass when doing the shortcut. Now failing the cut is just about as fast as not taking the cut at all, so either way you should always go for it, but yeah, try being on the right hand side of the cut if you can. After taking the cut, you want to start another right drift right before getting to lap 2 because you want to build up a super mini turbo around the first turn here. Knowing how to soft drift is going to be a huge help in that regard. Now just like in the level 1 version of the run, you want to take the right hand side path, but now instead of doing a driftless mini turbo, we want to do a right hop, trick off the ramp, and then slip drift left to build up a mini turbo on this part of the track. Then we want to release the mini turbo as soon as possible and do a right hop for alignment purposes before tricking off the ramp at the end of the path. The reason for doing the right hop before the first ramp is that it makes you face just a bit to the right when landing on the path, and this is useful because it gives you more time to actually build up the mini turbo before the second ramp. If you're using the Waluigi build, then you really do have to do this right hop, and when you land you want a soft drift to build up that mini turbo. If you're using Yoshi, you don't really need to do that hop, and you actually have a lot more freedom to wiggle drift to build up that mini turbo if you need to. The last difference between the level 1 version of the run and my PB is the shortcut. In the level 1 version of the run, we pretty much just tricked off the ramp and then shroomed through the shortcut on every lap. In my current personal best, I try to use the world record strategies, and this is much more complicated than the level 1 version of the run. The idea here is to do a mini turbo trick off the ramp at the end of the lap. There are a few reasons for this. For one, tricking off the ramp before the shortcut gives you a bunch of airtime. To explain why this is so slow would require that I basically put together an entirely separate video, but suffice it to say that spending more time in the air is bad. For 2, mini turbo tricks are a lot faster than regular tricks. And 3, the mini turbo trick generally allows you to get a better line when coming out of the shortcut. Now how do we actually get this mini turbo trick? Step 1 is to do a left hop followed by a right drift. As soon as you land, start holding left on the joystick and go off the ramp. Keep holding on the drift button and left on the joystick until you're just about at peak height. And once you get to your peak height, start holding down right on the joystick to charge up a mini turbo. As soon as you land, use the mushroom and start holding left on the joystick because if you don't, you'll fly out of bounds before landing on the track after the shortcut. Then release the mini turbo and trick off the ramp at the same time and you're good to go. As far as I can tell, this strat saves around 0.2 to 0.3 seconds per lap over the level 1 version of the shortcut, so it's definitely worth it to learn, but complicated enough that I'd say hold off on trying to learn how to do this until you're comfortable with basically everything else. Now let's take a look at laps 1 and 3 of my current personal best so that we can see how a more optimized run is supposed to look. And that's everything you need to know about Wild Woods on 200cc. I really love this course, and I hope that after going through the high-level strategies in detail that you can all start to enjoy the course more as well. Let me know down in the comments if and how much time you were able to save from following the advice laid out in this video, because I'd love to hear from you. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to do some basic training, and as always, I'll see you in the next video.